The world is going to have a new monetary system in this decade that we're in. We're going to experience this huge deflationary crash around the world, and people will just lose confidence in currency. And what do they always go back to throughout history? Time after time, for the last 5,000 years actually, they always go back to gold and silver. So it all started back in 1999 when my sister and I hired a financial planner to help my mother with her assets, and we gave him control of the family's assets, and in the next year and a half he lost 50% of what she had. You know, he would come to us every 6 months. We'd have a meeting, and he'd have this smile on his face, just ear-to-ear smile, going, "We did really well. The S&P lost 24%, and you only lost 18." And so I fired him, and I moved all of her assets to cash, and I dove into studying the financial markets, which led me into studying the economy. And when you start reading about the global economy, the people that are concerned with trade deficits and budget deficits, it's the hard money advocates, the gold community. And once I started reading them, they also write about monetary history, and then I really fell in love. Because monetary history just repeats and repeats over and over again, echoing all the way back to the beginnings of civilization. Gold and silver have been the predominant currencies for about 5,000 years. But it wasn't until somewhere between 680 BC and 630 BC that they became money. That's when they were minted into coins of equal weights somewhere in Lydia, where each coin was the same size and had the same weight. This made them interchangeable. It's called fungible. At that point, they became useful as a unit of account, a measurement. You could price a good or a service in those gold or silver coins in a certain number of them. And it was always the same for anybody whenever they were buying that good or service. But it wasn't until they made their way to the world's first free market society, the prototype of democracy, the cradle of civilization, Athens, that they exploded in use. Suddenly, money found its natural home, the free markets. Athens was the first society to have a working tax system and free markets. This enabled them to rise to the pinnacle of civilization. Their prosperity allowed them to create great works of art and achieve a level of architecture and engineering that the world had not yet seen. Here we are 2,500 years later, and people are still in awe of their achievements. It was truly a fantastic period in human history, and the Athens star shone brightly for many years. So this begs the question, what went wrong? How did such a great and powerful civilization fall? The answer lies in the same pattern that we see throughout history: too much greed and too much war. It was when the Athenians got involved in the Peloponnesian Wars, a war with Sparta, that their monetary problems began. First, they lost access to their gold and silver mines. They were also paying armies that were on foot, and they were miles and miles away from Athens. So as they pay their armies to buy goods and services from the local populations, a deflation occurs in Athens because they're sending all of their coinage out of the city. Then they started debasing their coinage to pay for the war. If you take in 1,000 coins in taxes, and then you melt those down, those gold coins, and you mix 50% copper into your gold, now you can mint 2,000 coins. So if you take in only 1,000 coins, but you spend 2,000 coins, what is that called? That is deficit spending. Athens began to do that during this war with Sparta. They also had these great public works, which were very expensive, and they finished the Temple of Athena Nike during the truce in the middle. There was a 6-year truce in the middle of this 27-year war. So they didn't stop their great public works and allow their market economy to heal from the expense of this war. As they debased their coinage, people would take the new debased coins at face value at first, until there were a whole bunch of those, and there's something called Gresham's Law where people tend to save to keep the thing that's rare, and they spend the thing that's common into circulation first. So all of the gold and silver coins started to disappear from circulation and become quite rare, and it was just these copper coins. Suddenly, it took a whole bunch of copper coins to buy a gold or silver coin, one of those old gold or silver coins. This is the first time that gold or silver ever had a price. Before that, everything was measured in a weight of gold and silver. So a large factor in Athens' downfall was the expense of war, the expansion of empire, the debasement of their currency, the eventual inflation that was caused. You know, they minted these coins until they became nothing but flecks of copper. This was actually the world's first hyperinflation. And what it did was it financially debilitated Athens to the point where in 404 BC they surrendered to Sparta. And eventually they became nothing but a satellite of Rome. The thing that amazes me is how history just keeps on repeating and repeating and repeating, and we never learn from all of our stupid mistakes. We just repeat the same stupid mistakes over and over and over again. Today we are doing the same thing that the Athenians did that caused the loss of their great culture. We're doing the same currency debasement. We're doing the same deficit spending, and it's for the same reasons. It's for war, and it's for great public works.
The interesting thing about the Peloponnesian War was how it started. I would say one of the interesting parallels is that it started really with Athens at its height and with a level of hubris that set them down the road towards ruin. Perhaps they felt that they were,
superior, couldn't make a mistake.
Exactly.
They knew better.
Exactly. And they ended up destroying their society as a result.
It's a road that we're going down today, right?
I think absolutely.
Yeah. There was a play written shortly after the Peloponnesian Wars about the worthlessness of the copper flecks that were their coinage at the time. So we go from gold and silver, very high value money, to a currency that has a face value. And it's the first example that I can find in history where a war and great public works were being funded through deficit spending. What you've just seen is the first recorded example of one of the most predictable hidden secrets of money, the 7 stages of empire. It's a long-term cycle that echoes throughout history right to this very day and is basically a societal pendulum that swings from quality money to quantity currency and back again to quality money. It always plays out in 7 stages. It always ends with gold delivering a knockout blow to debased currencies. And it goes like this. Stage 1. A country starts out with good money, which is either gold or silver, or it's backed by gold or silver. Stage 2. As it develops economically and socially, it begins to take on more and more economic burdens, adding layer upon layer of public works. Stage 3. As its economic affluence grows, so does its political influence, and it increases expenditures to fund a massive military. Stage 4. Eventually, it puts its military to use, and expenditures explode. Stage 5. To fund the war, it steals the wealth of its people by debasing their coinage with base metals, or by replacing their money with currency that can be created in unlimited quantities. Stage 6. The loss in purchasing power of the expanded currency supply is sensed by the population and the financial markets, triggering a loss of faith in the currency. Stage 7. A mass movement out of currency into precious metals and other tangible assets takes place. The currency collapses, and gold and silver rise in price as they account for the huge quantity of currency that was created. This process transfers massive wealth to those who had the foresight to position themselves beforehand in real money, gold and silver. You know, our monetary system basically steals from the poor and middle class and transfers the wealth to the banks. We see this throughout history, and it's just repeating over and over again. What's happening in Greece right now is basically the same thing that was happening back in 407 BC. The deficit spending to fund all of these public works and the debasement of their currency supply caused them to become nothing but a satellite of Rome. Today, they're becoming nothing but a satellite of the banks.
Well, the idea of Gresham's law is simply that people are going to hold on to what's value and spend what isn't valuable. Way back in my youth, I was 11 years old when we went from a silver-based monetary system to a purely fiat system. People saw that silver was money. They got used to it. They didn't really think about it. And in 1965, under President Johnson, he basically said, well, silver's too valuable to be money. We're going to just start putting out these substitutes, which were what we call cupro-nickel coins. They were nickel, they were copper plated with nickel at the time. And of course, the metal value was far less. And I understood that as a kid, and yet very few adults really seemed to get the idea of what was really going on. There were a few, and it only takes a few. And of course, the Gresham's law took effect, so the currency came out of circulation rapidly. It's very interesting to me, knowing monetary history fairly well, is they're always, put out in silver-looking or gold-looking form. I mean, in most cases, you'll have, in fact, they look rather interesting. I mean, some of them are like silver on the inside and gold on the outside with the look. They have no value at all, really, other than melt value of pot metal. To me, it's sort of at a subconscious level. Why are they making them gold-colored? Why are they making them silver-colored? I think there's an inherent knowledge in the human species that knows that gold and silver have value. So if they look in their pocket and they see something gold-colored or silver-colored, it gives them kind of a warm, fuzzy feeling. And it's like, oh, yeah, but there's no value in these coins, really.
The next question is, how does this affect you? My next stop was in London, where I'd been asked to give a presentation to a group of businessmen. They wanted to understand the reason that gold had surged recently, and I explained to them that to understand gold, you have to understand monetary history. Once you see where we've come from, you can get a much clearer understanding of how the 7 stages of empire are playing out right now. We weren't allowed to show their faces, but we were allowed to film my presentation. So here it is, the last 140 years of monetary history condensed into just 10 minutes. Keep the 7 stages of empire in mind, and as you watch this, see if you can recognize the signs. Everybody thinks the U.S. dollar is still as good as gold, and it hasn't been since 1971. This is the world monetary systems. From 1873, when Germany went on the classical gold standard, where each unit of currency is backed up by an equivalent amount of gold in the treasury. In the United States, $20 bill, $20 gold piece in the vaults. Go into any bank, slap down your currency, which was a receipt for money, a claim check on money, ask for your money, gold and silver, and they would give it to you. So this shows, this is currency, this is money. Otherwise, there was no reason for any government to store gold in their vaults and then print this currency that was backed by gold. This is what gives confidence in that, and it gives governments the ability to start this scam in the first place, where they print these receipts for gold, and then they can print more of them than gold that exists. And that happened when we got to World War I, and all the combatants stopped redemption rights. You could no longer go in the bank and trade your pounds, lira, marks, francs, no longer redeemable in gold. And they lit up the printing presses and started printing like crazy. Then between the wars, they went on something called the gold exchange standard, where currencies would be backed partially by gold. So in the United States, under the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, the Federal Reserve was allowed to put $50 worth of claim checks on gold, currency in circulation, backed up by only $20 worth of gold. So it was a 40% reserve ratio. For every $20 gold piece in the vault, they could put $50 in circulation.
We're the dollars of the nation on parade. We're the biggest batch of dollars ever made. Oh, we used to march by millions, but now we march by billions, and maybe we'll be trillions for your dead. We're the
Then we get to 1944. Now, during both wars, Europe paid the U.S. with gold. During World War I, the U.S. didn't get into the war until the very end of it. We didn't really have troops on the ground here in any quantity until the last 6 months of the war. So for the first 4 years or so, we're selling you all of, you take all of your young men off of the farms and turn them into soldiers. You take your factories that make toasters and they start making machine guns. Your factories that made cars are now building tanks. And so you turn your economy toward war, and all of your consumer goods and your grains had to be imported from the United States, and you paid us with gold. Then in World War II, Hitler starts saber rattling in 1936, annexes Austria in 38, and invades Poland in 39. Pearl Harbor wasn't until the end of 1941. We didn't have troops on the ground until, I believe, August of 42. So again, there's like 6 years where you're paying us with your gold, and we're selling you stuff. This is where Americans have this myth that war is good for the economy. War is good for the economy if you're not in it and you're selling them the tools of the trade.
Yes, America's national income gets bigger and bigger. In 1943, it was $142 billion. That was double the 1939 figure, triple the figure for 1933.
But by the end of World War II, the U.S. had 2/3 of all the world's monetary gold, the central bank gold, and the rest of the world had to share the other third, and Europe had none. So the world monetary system was no longer going to work. It would collapse. But we had made all these loans of dollars to Europe, so Europe was flooded with dollars. And so representatives from around the world met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire in 1944. They came up with a new world monetary system called the Bretton Woods system, where every currency on the planet, with the exception of just a few, they would be backed by the U.S. dollar, and the U.S. dollar would then be backed by gold at $35 per ounce. This gave confidence to all currencies. So this gave the world stability, and it pegged all the world's currencies to each other through the dollar to gold. So there was no such thing as the forex. Currencies didn't float. The exchange rates were fixed year after year, and this helped to make world trade boom. Then the dollar standard starts because we kept on printing dollars. Under the Bretton Woods system, there was no reserve ratio established where the U.S. actually had to have a certain amount of gold for how many dollars we created. So we had done a bunch of deficit spending for Korea, for Vietnam, for Johnson's Great Society, and expanded the currency supply, the amount of paper dollars in circulation, and exported them all over the world. And then in the 60s, Charles de Gaulle, president of France, realizes that we don't have the gold to back up the dollars.
Le fait que beaucoup d'États acceptent par principe des dollars au même titre que de l'or entraîne les Américains à s'endetter et à s'endetter gratuitement vis-à-vis de l'étranger, car ce qu'ils lui doivent, ils le lui payent avec des dollars qu'il ne tient qu'à eux d'émettre. Nous estimons nécessaire que les échanges internationaux soient établis, comme c'était le cas avant les grands malheurs du monde, sur une base monétaire indiscutable et qui ne porte la marque d'aucun pays en particulier. Quelle base? En vérité, on ne voit pas qu'il puisse y avoir réellement de critères, d'étalons autres que l'or.
And he starts asking, France asks for their gold and trades in the dollars. And at that point, other countries saw this and start jumping on board. And the U.S. lost 50% of its gold from 1959 to 1971. But we still had, in 71, about 12 times more dollars that we had created than there was gold. And this run on the bank, basically, the U.S. now being the bank, this is a giant worldwide bank run, because the U.S., for the second time, had committed a fraud and created more receipts for gold than there was gold. It's that simple. Then finally, the markets sort of sensed this. And Nixon was forced to take us off the gold standard, because if he had paid out gold until it got to zero, once we couldn't pay on some of those dollars, the entire worldwide monetary system would have collapsed.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States. In full cooperation with the International Monetary Fund and those who trade with us, we will press for the necessary reforms to set up an urgently needed new international monetary system.
And on August 15th, 1971, all the world's currencies became fiat currency. I don't know why the rest of the world didn't rush out and hang him, but they didn't. They just all went along with this.
To our friends abroad, I give this assurance. The United States has always been and will continue to be a forward-looking and trustworthy trading partner.
There have been thousands upon thousands upon thousands of fiat currencies throughout history, and there isn't one that survived. It is a 100% failure rate. And we started this experiment where all the world's currencies would be fiat currencies simultaneously in 1971. But what we have here, 30 to 40 years, different monetary system, 30 years, 28 years, 39 years plus, what's next? The world is going to have a new monetary system in this decade that we're in. We're going to experience this huge deflationary crash around the world. The world will probably end up on some sort of new monetary system, probably after governments try and print their way out of this and cause hyperinflations of all the currencies, and people will just lose confidence in currency. And what do they always go back to throughout history? Time after time, for the last 5,000 years actually, they always go back to gold and silver.
In a world of floating currencies, and that's what all national currencies are today, they bob up and down relative to each other, but they're all sinking relative to gold. That includes the dollar as well as the euro and the British pound and all the others. They're going to continue to lose value, continue to lose purchasing power.
Personally, I don't think there's any way of avoiding what is coming. There's no way to fix it right now. There's only a way to either let it wipe you out or to benefit from it. And I want to make sure that it's not just it's not just a few of the big investors in the world that are ending up with all the cookies. I want to make sure that there's as many small investors as possible that are benefiting from it, because that's what makes society run. Middle class, small investor.
One of the biggest challenges for human beings is that physiologically we are designed to operate in recency. You know, the fight or flight response is literally in my cells, literally. And so that when I'm in the wild, it's about I need to look for something to eat or make sure I don't get eaten. And how that translates into the modern world is that we think only about what's happening immediately in front of us. And so we think a long time is last week. In the world of YouTube and Facebook and instant messaging, we think 3 seconds is a long time. Like, did you get the post already? I already posted it. And the reality is, that if you look at history, and I don't mean a week, I don't mean a month, I mean decades, I mean 100 years, I mean a couple of 100 years, I mean more than a couple of 100 years, you can start to see some patterns. You can see some things that are going on because history repeats itself. There's some trends and there are some movements that you can learn from. And you literally have to go outside of your human instincts to look at history, because we just want to focus on right now, because as I said, that's about either eating or being eaten. So we're going to go beyond that, and that means not just focusing on the here and now, but learning some real powerful stuff from what's happened, because there just might be some indicators there as what's going to happen in the future.
Now, the 7 stages of empire, just as a reminder, started with sound money. And then a country adds layers of public works and social programs, and then develops a massive military, and then puts that military to use. And to pay for the war, it debases its currency supply, which causes a loss of faith in the currency, which then leads to a currency crisis, and gold does an accounting of the expansion of that fiat currency supply that happened over all those years of the first 5 stages. We are in the 6th and beginning the 7th stage. Gold started the accounting in the year 2001. It was $250 then, but we're still in the very early stages of this.
Well, that's right. I think one of the problems with gold is people just don't understand it. I mean, for one thing, it's sort of been banished from the curriculum for 35 years. We have going on 2 generations of academics and scholars who have never studied gold. Unless you're a specialist in economic history, you can go back and look at it. Now, when I was in university and even when I was in graduate school in economics, we were still on the gold standard in some form. It was fairly attenuated, but when you studied the IMF and you looked at how they present the finances of a country and the breakdown of the reserves and the capital accounts, gold was a line item in the capital account, and you had to understand how it, what role it played and how it could equilibrate in terms of balance of trade. Well, that's gone. The IMF, Nixon went off the gold standard in 1971, and bright young economic students just don't understand gold. They think it's a joke, or they think it's maybe a commodity trade or a momentum trade. They don't understand that it really is money par excellence.
So now we've learned that money was born in roughly 630 BC when it became fungible. It was free markets and sound money that led to Athens' great prosperity. But debasement of their money for deficit spending on war and public works played a large role in their demise. Over the past 140 years, we've debased our own currencies to the point where 2 generations of scholars don't even understand gold. We learned about Gresham's law and that bad money drives out good. In recent history, there has been a new monetary system roughly every 40 years. And we've learned that we are in the 6th stage of the 7 stages of empire. So that's it for this episode. Join us next time when we learn more about the chaotic state of the U.S. dollar standard and how it's going to affect you no matter where you live on the planet. When I wrote my book, I said that we're coming into an era that is going to be the greatest wealth transfer in the history of mankind. Therefore, it's the greatest opportunity in the history of mankind. I've made it my mission to help as many people as possible get through this crisis and to come out on the best side of the wealth transfer. I've just finished filming an exclusive presentation titled How the 7th Stage Will Unfold, where I detail what I'm doing personally to prepare for a range of scenarios. It's available at hiddensecretsofmoney.com as part of your free information toolkit. So my challenge to you for this episode is to try and find a single example in all of monetary history of a crisis that was brought on by too much deficit spending, too much debt, and too much currency debasement being solved by more deficit spending, more debt, and more currency debasement. Until then, good luck, and I'll see you at the bonus presentation at hiddensecretsofmoney.com. Thanks.
You bet. There is no other side. You're either silver and gold or you're doomed. That's exactly the way the world is always working. That's the way it's working right now. Turn on the television, watch with the price of gold. Look at the dollar going down. Gold's going up. Silver's going up. That's exactly the way it's always worked, and it's always worked that way, and it's working that way now. And why is anyone surprised? Why is anyone surprised? It's always worked like that.
That's 5,000 years.
That's right. 5,000 years in a row, it's worked exactly that way. It's happening that way now. And ooh, wait a minute here. Weird. Beyond weird.
Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money is made possible by the clients of goldsilver.com. Your continued loyalty and support allows us to educate the public on how to both protect themselves and benefit in the turbulent times ahead. To all goldsilver.com customers, thank you. Hidden Secrets of Money would not be possible without you.
I'm in Singapore, and I'm about to go on stage in just a few minutes. I have not given a presentation for over a year now. I was in a little fender bender a while back, and so I took a little bit of time off. There's this sense of urgency now. The global dollar standard was put in place by a series of accidental events that were very fortunate for the United States because it gave us an advantage over the rest of the world. But our politicians over the past decade or so have abused this privilege as though it was their birthright. And now the rest of the world are turning their backs on the U.S. dollar standard. This is going to cause a financial calamity the likes of which we've never seen before, and it's going to be devastating for most people. I don't want this to happen, but the damage has already been done. So I'm going around trying to alert people and show them how they can protect themselves and turn this into a great opportunity for themselves.
There's always one result from what we are doing right now, expanding the currency supplies all over the planet. There's one result, and that is higher gold and silver prices.
I love America, at least the America that the Founding Fathers created, and I'm hoping that people get interested in this so that they'll see that what made America great is the answer to our problems, to get back to free markets, free people, and sound money. Our own history proves that this is the road to maximum prosperity. We are entering a period of financial crisis that is the greatest the world has ever known. The wealth transfer that will take place during this decade is the greatest wealth transfer in history. Wealth is never destroyed, it is merely transferred, and that means that on the opposite side of every crisis there is an opportunity. The great news is that all you have to do to turn this crisis into your great opportunity is to educate yourself. I believe that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is your own education. Education on the history of money, education on finance, education on how the global economy works, education on how all of these guys, the central bankers, the stock market, how they can cheat you, how they can scam you. If you learn what is going on and how the financial world works, you can put yourself on the correct side of this wealth transfer. Winston Churchill once said that the further you look into the past, the further that you can see into the future. This program is all about creating your own crystal ball, being able to gaze into the future, being able to change this crisis, the greatest crisis in the history of mankind, into your great opportunity. I was born in Salem, Oregon in 1956, and we moved to California when I was 4 years old in 1960. But when I went to school, it was obvious after just the fourth grade that there was something different with me. And by fifth grade, I was in remedial classes, and it turned out that I was dyslexic, and teachers were not taught to recognize that back then. I was always falling behind everyone else. When I would get a teacher that would lecture instead of making us read out of books, I would just absolutely excel. I suddenly went from the dumbest kid in class to the smartest kid in all of the periods of that class. But the result was that, after a while I was in every single remedial class, and I just couldn't take it. And in 10th grade I dropped out, middle of 10th grade, and I've never been back to school. I often say that in every crisis there's an opportunity, and in this case, the handicap of dyslexia has also been a blessing. Because I couldn't learn out of books, and I couldn't take notes, I just had to remember everything. And I have the ability to, my brain's wired a little bit differently. I have the ability to look at a chart today, and I know how it relates to a chart that I saw 10 years ago. But it was back in about the year 2000 when Steve Jobs of Apple introduced OS X. The world of books opened up to me. Built right into the operating system was a text-to-speech program. Now I could just have an assistant slice and scan my books and turn them into text and email me, and then all I have to do is highlight the text, press a button, and the computer reads to me.
People are turning to assets that will keep their value if prices rise. So much money has been pumped into the system that people are worried about inflation down the road, said Bruno S. Frey, professor of economics at the University of Zurich.
So dyslexia is no longer a problem. But what it's also done for me is I have the ability to explain complex things to people in a simple manner for some reason. And so I sort of made it my mission to try and wake up the middle class, to let them know how the monetary system works, to let them know that there is a major economic calamity coming sometime down the road, and it's most likely within this decade that we're in right now. The U.S. dollar is about 60% of the value of all the currency on the planet, and more than half of the dollars reside outside the United States. The reason every country has U.S. dollars is, first of all, that's what central banks use as the reserve currency. Second of all, oil is priced in dollars. So this is the world, and what you see here is that these are the countries that are avoiding the U.S. dollar in trade. They're doing bilateral agreements where they'll either hold each other's currency and settle that way, or they're establishing, like right now, they're talking about a BRICS bank, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, having a bank that will do settlements between the countries directly without using the U.S. dollar. These countries, they tried to avoid using the U.S. dollar, like Iran tried, and we banned them from using SWIFT. How many here have made wire transfers before? So do you know what a SWIFT number is? It's a code that you plug in, and this SWIFT system is what transfers those dollars from one person's account to another person's account. Well, Iran decided that they were going to sell oil only in euros. They got banned from SWIFT. But there's countries right now coming up with a replacement for SWIFT, and it doesn't use the dollar. It's the Sukra system. And Iraq started selling oil for euros. In Libya, they were talking about creating the gold dinar and selling oil for gold. So those are the countries that were trying to use something other than the dollar. Then we've got gold competing with currency. And there's a lot of talk around here about the gold dinar, and there's people that are actually using gold in some of the countries over here. And then in Utah has recognized gold and silver as money again. It's legal tender currency in the state of Utah in the United States. And then you've got physical gold accumulation. I'll show you later that China is accumulating an immense amount of gold, but all the countries with an up arrow, that's gold accumulation. Then we have gold repatriation. Germany has been asking for their gold back, and they're getting it. Venezuela has repatriated their gold from the Bank of England. And then if we put this on a timeline, here's the nails in the coffin for the dollar standard, and you will see that there's not a lot of time left. This is my evidence that I think is proof that the death of the dollar is coming, and it's coming shortly. Nixon ended Bretton Woods, and we went on the dollar standard. Then the first nail in the coffin is Iraq sells oil in euros. The crisis of 2008, and we added 1.25 trillion to our base money in the United States. As we add to the base currency, people get worried about inflation. They start rushing toward gold and silver. Iran ends oil sales in dollars, and they're taking commodities in trade for oil. They're taking, in Turkey, they take the local currency and then buy gold in Turkey and export the gold to Iran. So they're basically selling oil for gold. They do the same thing with India. QE2, quantitative easing, that's more currency printing in the United States. Libya, China and Russia bypassed the dollar. They did a bilateral trade agreement where they hold each other's currency, and they do direct debt settlement without having to wire transfer U.S. dollars. Chinese president just recently said that the dollar as the world's reserve currency is a product of the past. Utah recognized silver and gold as money. China and Iran bypassed the U.S. dollar with a bilateral trade agreement. Venezuela repatriates its gold. China and Japan trade directly. India and Japan bypass the U.S. dollar. Russia and Iran trade directly. Iran sells India oil for rupees and commodities. China and Brazil trade directly. Swiss citizens demand gold repatriation. African countries ban the dollar. In Zambia, you can go to jail if you use U.S. dollars. Quantitative easing number 3. They have announced at the Federal Reserve that they're starting with $40 billion of currency that they're creating each month, and now it jumps to $85 billion. That's more than $1 trillion a year. And remember, it took 200 years to go from no dollars to 825 billion, and now they're going to create $1 trillion every year. Iran trading energy for gold. Singapore removes tax on money. Germany repatriates 150 tons of gold from the New York Fed. The citizens of Netherlands demand gold repatriation. Ecuador repatriates part of its gold reserves. Austrian citizens demanding gold repatriation. China acknowledges fundamental market shortage of gold. And now the Fed is increasing the rate of printing. I said from 40 to 85 billion every month, just over $1 trillion per year. So those are the nails in the coffin for the dollar standard. And if you noticed, they're all speeding up, and they're all happening right now. You don't have a whole lot of time. And if you wait too long, then the opportunity is gone.
It's going to fail. Why is the dollar sacrosanct? Why is it not going to happen to the US dollar? Well, it will. People think, oh no, it's high technology, or we have computers now, or the internet. And these are ridiculous arguments. The truth is, all fiat currencies have failed, and there's no reason why this one won't. What worries me again so much is that it's a global situation. And so it's going to cause problems on a global basis. And it's a trust breaking down. And you're already seeing the trust breaking down, as I said earlier, because you're seeing different countries exchange directly with each other's currencies, circumventing the dollar. You're seeing that in oil. You're going to see it more and more. And people are just going to opt out of the dollar. And you'll probably get to a point before the whole thing collapses entirely where the dollar is more or less used internally in the United States and externally is not used as much, because there'll be a lot of agreements made between nation states outside the United States that will want to use each other's currency and not the dollar.
This isn't going to be pretty when it happens. I am not an end-of-worlder or a doomsday guy. All you can do is play the hand that you are dealt. If we go to a new monetary system, and I think it's absolutely inevitable, there's just too much energy built up in this one that has to release. It has to come crashing down somehow. When that happens, there's an enormous wealth transfer for people that are on one side of the bet or another. And people don't realize that whether they think they are making a bet or not, they are making the bet. They are involved. This wealth transfer affects everybody, whether you want to participate or not. If you're holding paper assets and paper currencies, you have bet one direction. If you're holding gold and physical assets, you've bet the opposite direction. So these are changes in Chinese holdings. They are accumulating gold. They are getting rid of U.S. Treasury bonds. This is gold held in China. The green line is the cumulative gold. That's on this side, this scale. So it's gone from about 700 tons to almost 6,000 tons just since the year 2000. So this is their central bank holdings. This is their mine supply. But this is, and my researcher put all of this data together. You're the first people to see this. This is the amount of gold flowing through the Hong Kong exchange that goes into China. And the past couple of years here, they have ramped up their buying. They know that the dollar standard is coming to an end, and they are protecting themselves, and you're probably going to see gold-backed renminbi someday, the yuan. So this is an interesting chart. Changing global influence. So this is the correlation to this basket of currencies. This basket of currencies, if you add them all up, they're trading up or they're trading down. And this was pre-crisis, so it's before 2008. So this is from the International Monetary Fund. It's their data. So from 2005 to 2008, this is the correlation of, you know, if that basket of currencies was trading up, the dollar was probably doing about the same thing as what it's saying. The Chinese renminbi, a little less so. And then this is today. The U.S. dollar is done for.
I don't think there's any question we're heading for a new monetary system. The question is what will it consist of? You know, the four choices are sort of a world of multiple reserve currencies. And Barry Eichengreen, Berkeley, is the leading proponent of this, or leading scholar on this topic. The problem with that, and where I disagree with Eichengreen, is there's no anchor in that system. We did have multiple reserve currencies before in the 1920s. He's right about that, and it was sterling and the dollar, but they were both anchored to gold. And in the post-Bretton Woods world, since 1944, it's been one reserve currency, which is the anchor, and it was anchored to gold until 1971. Since then, the dollar has been detached from gold, but all the other currencies are still linked to the dollar. So at the end of the day, we've had an anchor of some kind. We've never had a world of multiple reserve currencies with no anchor. I'm not sure that's that stable. The SDR is the second choice. The SDR is a basket currency sponsored by the IMF. At least for the time being, it's also printed money. The IMF literally prints the SDRs and ships them out to the members. And their reserves go up, exactly the way the Fed creates money and bank reserves go up. But it's not backed by anything. Third choice is gold, some variation on the gold standard. And the fourth choice is what I call chaos, which is that nobody does anything. There's a lot of wishful thinking. There's a lot of denial. There's a lot of delay. And we get to the point where people just totally lose faith in paper currencies, go to hard assets, and we have a sequential collapse of paper currencies around the world, at which point governments will have to react with emergency measures. And that could include coercion, confiscation, various sorts of freezes on paper assets. Could be a lot of things in that scenario. So to me, it's multiple reserve currencies, SDRs, gold, or chaos. I favor gold, but I fear that we may get chaos.
I've talked about every 30 to 40 years the world has a new monetary system. And the thing is that over the years, governments and the banks have basically screwed us more and more and more. And these new currency systems are always created by the same idiots that created the last one that fell apart. It's the big banks, it's the central banks, and it's governments that are creating these new systems each time. And each time, the system they come up with is a system that cheats the population more and enriches the government and the banks more. It's a system that transfers wealth at greater and greater speeds. You know, this one is going to fall apart just like all of the others. There's a difference this time, though. There's the internet. People are connected all over the world. Information is spreading, and people are getting educated. So I'm hoping that we go back to gold. Not a gold standard. Gold standards suck. I did a video on that. With a gold standard, there's supposed to be a certain amount of gold in the vaults for each unit of currency. In other words, it's a 1-to-1 ratio is the way it started. And then they print more receipts than gold that exists. So if we have gold standards, we're going to get scammed again. If we used gold and silver, if the public gets educated enough before all of this happens, if we went back to gold and silver, then governments can't scam us. It limits their ability to transfer wealth from the population to the government and to the banks. A lot of people say that you can't use gold and silver today because they're too heavy and bulky, and it's completely wrong. You could put gold and silver in a vault, and you could make payments to somebody by transferring ownership of nanograms, grams, or ounces of gold and silver from one person's account to another by means of a check, a credit card, or even your cell phone. If we go back to a gold-backed currency, gold-backed U.S. dollar, at that point, I think the minimum scam that the U.S. could get away with, which means the minimum number of dollars in existence that they could make convertible into gold, would be the dollars that are held in foreign central banks. That would be similar to the Bretton Woods system that we had from 1944 to 71. Well, I did some analysis on this when I was writing the book back in 2005, and back then it required $20,000 an ounce gold for the Treasury to have enough gold to cover those dollars, or the New York Fed, actually. And if they were going to back all of the dollars, you're talking gold measured in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per ounce. There just isn't that much gold, and there's a whole lot of currency. We keep on printing it every minute of every day. This is gold and how it accounts for a currency supply. This is our base money in the United States, which was gold back here from 1900 until the Federal Reserve. The amount of currency in circulation in gold were the same. Then we established the Federal Reserve, and we inflated for World War I, and we had more currency in circulation than we had gold to back it. There were some bank runs in the 30s. Then Roosevelt unpegged the dollar from gold, and gold's value rose from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce, and when it did, the value of the gold held at the U.S. Treasury rose to meet the value of all the currency that was printed in the meantime. Here's the same chart again, but now I'm taking it out to 1971, and what you see is these gold inflows during World War I. During World War II, it's another 117% gold increase. This is what made the United States a superpower. It's all financial. It isn't our war machine necessarily. It's all the gold inflows that we got because everybody else was at war and we were isolated from it. And they had to pay us for all their consumer goods and so on. And then we jumped into the war and we inflated, and then in about 1959, countries started figuring out that we didn't have all the gold. You know, we were printing more dollars than gold that we had to back it, and under the Bretton Woods system, they could go to the New York Fed and turn in their dollars for gold at $35 per ounce. Only foreign central banks. Individuals couldn't do that. So gold started flowing out, and the U.S. lost 50% of its gold from 59 to 71, and in the meantime, we kept on printing currency. If this had continued until it got down to zero, if there was one more dollar out there that laid claim to gold, that came in and said, we want our gold for a currency, and there was no gold to back it up, the entire world monetary system would have come crashing down. So Nixon had to take us off of the Bretton Woods system, the last vestiges of the gold standard in August 15th of 71. So here's the same chart again. There's the first chart and the second chart to 71, and now I'm taking it out to 85, and I'm adding a second line here. How many people would agree that credit cards are replacing cash in circulation? Yeah? Credit cards, you use your credit card more and more every year, right? You use cash less and less. Well, this is outstanding credit card balances. It's called revolving credit outstanding is the name of the chart that you get from the Federal Reserve. When you charge something on a credit card, you create currency. The bank didn't actually loan you anything. They invented numbers, and then they have the gall to charge you interest if you don't pay those numbers back on time. So the thing is that the merchant that you're paying, the restaurant or the grocery store, that merchant's checking account can't tell the difference between the credit dollars that you created or the cash dollars that you pay them. So to that merchant's checking account, it all looks the same, and those dollars that you created stay in circulation until somebody saves them up and pays down credit card debt. So unpaid credit card balances I include as part of the cash in circulation, and in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard, and gold became a freely traded separate commodity/money, and it did an accounting of the currency supply. There was quite a while here where we could have gone back on the gold standard. The value of the gold at the Treasury exceeded all the dollars printed from George Washington to Jimmy Carter. And for a week or so, a couple of weeks, it exceeded base money plus outstanding revolving credit. So here's the same chart again. That was to 1985, and now I'm going to take it out to today. And so there's that 1980 peak where it shot past base money and base money plus outstanding revolving credit. And then we get to the crisis of 08. And Ben Bernanke, oh, by the way, instead of billions, we're now measuring in trillions. So we started in millions, and then it went to billions, and now it's trillions. So we did the bailouts and all the quantitative easings, and that's what the currency supply looks like today. And then they announced quantitative easing 3, which is that $85 billion a month that they're creating, and they think they're going to have to do it until about 2015. So here's the projection for gold covering the currency supply today would be $13,400 per ounce gold, for history to repeat and for gold to do the same thing that it did in 1934 and in 1980. And believe me, It shocked people in the 1970s. When gold was $35 an ounce and Nixon took us off the Bretton Woods system, all the economists were predicting that gold was going to go down because now there was going to be no more monetary demand for it. Anybody that said gold was going to go to $100 was considered an absolute lunatic, and it went to $850. It rose 24 times its price. Well, when I wrote my book, we were right here with base money. So base money plus outstanding revolving credit. It took about $6,000 an ounce for history to repeat. Today it takes $13,400, and if you include the same overshoot, remember in 1980 it didn't just cover base money, but it shot past it. $24,000 an ounce gold is what it would require to meet that, except the Fed has announced that they're going to keep on printing currency until there's lower unemployment and the economy gets back on track. And they think till 2015. So the projected price, according to the Fed and history repeating, if the Fed does this and then history repeats and gold, the public gets afraid of what the Federal Reserve is doing and they rush toward gold and silver to protect their purchasing power, gold would have to rise from there to way up here, and that is $26,000 per ounce gold to cover. If it does the same overshoot, we're talking about $47,000 an ounce gold. Now, I don't even like to measure gold in dollars. If you measure it in a price doesn't mean anything. It's the value. How much can you buy with the proceeds? If we have deflation and some of this currency evaporates, because it's all just numbers that they type into a computer these days, if we have deflation, maybe gold peaks at $3,000 an ounce and the currency supply collapses to way down here somewhere, and the Dow is at 1,500. That means gold will still be double the Dow. You're still going to get 14 times more paper assets one day than you can buy today with them, and it's probably only a couple of years left that this is going to take, as you saw by how the nails in the coffin of the dollar standard, how they're speeding up. If we have big inflation and the Dow goes to 30,000, maybe gold will be 60,000 an ounce. And if we have hyperinflation, the Dow would be 30 trillion and gold would be 60 trillion. It doesn't matter. In any case, gold would buy you 14 times more paper assets than it does today. So these are the global assets. Here's the bond market. Here's the stock market. This is the value of real estate on the planet. And these are bank deposits, and there's gold. Now, that little slice of the pie is going to get a lot bigger in just the next few years, and it's not going to do it by a whole bunch more gold just appearing. It's going to do it by the price of other assets going down, or at least their value going down, and the value of gold going up. So the price of gold will change. That piece of the pie is going to grow. It was a lot bigger back in 1980 when gold was at $850. It's going to get a lot bigger today again, but today, as you've seen, it requires far, far higher prices. So, the death of the dollar standard. How many people here believe that I'm sort of predicting what's going on in the future here? You can see that there's a new world monetary system coming. It happens every 30 to 40 years, except this time, instead of a baby step off of gold, we've got to go from nothing back to something. It's going to be a worldwide convulsion, the scale of which has never been seen before.
At the end of the day, the fundamental driver of gold, it's not so much that gold's in a bull market, it's more the dollar's in a bear market. And people say, well, how high can gold go? And my answer is, well, how low can the dollar go? The answer is the dollar can go to zero. If you divide any number by zero, the answer is infinity. So gold can go to infinity if the dollar goes to zero. Now, in the real world, something else will happen. It's not that gold becomes worth infinite number of dollars. It's more the case that the dollar just falls off the stage. The dollar gets the hook, so to speak. And you'll count gold in dollars to 5,000 to 10,000 at some point. But there will come a time when you won't count gold in dollars anymore because dollars won't count. People won't want dollars.
There is so much opportunity in crisis, it is absolutely extraordinary. That's just not me saying that, that's just history. You read any amount of history, and I don't mean last week, I mean real history. You know, in times of crisis, it's when huge fortunes were made. In times of crisis, it's when human beings create and develop newest technologies and newest science and new medicines. In times of crisis, There's so much opportunity as long as you can remain calm, get educated, be resourceful. The challenge for most people is that in crisis, they go into crisis mode, which means they go into scarcity, they go into lack, they go into blame, and none of those emotions are resourceful for helping you solve whatever challenge is in front of you.
I believe that this is probably the greatest opportunity of anyone's lifetime. There has never been a situation where everything came together just like this. This is the first time in history where all the world's currencies are just fiat currencies backed by nothing. And if what I think is going to happen happens, this is the greatest wealth transfer in history. It's the greatest opportunity, and it'll never happen in our lifetimes again.
So now we've learned the following hidden secrets of money. There is a global loss of confidence in the U.S. dollar that is accelerating rapidly. The change to a new monetary system is inevitable and will most likely be chaotic. Gold standards do not work over long periods of time, but gold itself does. The public contributes to the massive amounts of currency creation by using credit cards and signing loans. Gold has already accounted for the expansion of U.S. dollars twice in the last century and may likely do so again.
So that's it for this episode. I thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. I know I threw around a bunch of astronomical prices for gold someday in the future, but it isn't the price measured in dollars. It's how much is its value. What is it worth? How much stuff can it purchase? The price measured in dollars, or any currency for that matter, is just a bunch of numbers, and it really doesn't mean anything. There are numbers that are created by the world's central banks, by the commercial bank system, and we're forced to transact in these currencies. But in our next episode, we're going to clear away the smoke screen of national currencies and show you how the world monetary system really works and how all national currencies have to continue losing value. It is not possible for them to maintain purchasing power over any reasonable period of time. As for the golden nails in the dollar's coffin, it's only been a short while since we filmed the presentation in Singapore, and already there are more of them. So for an update, visit hiddensecretsofmoney.com, and in your free information toolkit, there's an exclusive presentation on the latest developments of the golden nails in the dollar's coffin. Now, I know this episode was kind of serious and it might have you upset right now, but believe me, it's not all doom and gloom. As I've said many, many times before, there are these brief moments in history where the safest asset class, the safe haven investment for the last 5,000 years, also becomes the asset class that has the greatest potential gains in purchasing power, and I have bet my life on it. First, I became an investor back in 2002, and then I started telling everybody about it. I started warning them what was going to happen with the world economy and how to protect themselves, and I made it my mission to educate as many as I could. So in 2005, I wrote my book, and then I gave people a means to protect themselves and opened up goldsilver.com. I believe that my team and I have created the world's best precious metals dealership, because we don't just sell gold and silver, we are gold and silver investors. And what we want to do is help you understand how to get through what is coming, to protect yourself, and to turn all of these bad things around to your benefit. So if you decide that precious metals are for you, please visit goldsilver.com. We'd love the opportunity to become your dealer because we feel that we are more than a dealer. We are a partner with you, and we're on the same side of the fence as you. So thank you very much. Good luck. We'll see you at the exclusive presentation at hiddensecretsofmoney.com. Thanks.